All right, the time is now 6:56. I call to order this meeting of the Columbus Common Council Committee of the Whole for Tuesday, September 5th, 2017. Pat, when you're ready, if you'd please take the roll.
Hendrickson. Here. Kenny.
Here.
Malat.
Here.
Reed. Here. Rule.
Here.
Tome.
Here.
Traxler.
Here.
All present.
All right, this meeting has been noticed appropriately according to state statutes. Next is the approval of the agenda. So unless there's alterations, deletions, or discussions, I would take a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, anyone signed up for public comments? All right, thank you, guys. So number one on the agenda is consider request of the Popcorn Wagon Incorporated to accept donation of the George Hasey Popcorn Wagon to the city of Columbus. And Patrick, I see we have Mr. Stroshine here.
Yeah, I think Alan can probably fill everybody in on the situation much better than I, so.
Good evening. I'm president of the Columbus Popcorn Wagon, Inc. We also have board member, longtime treasurer Alice Schmidt here tonight. We have brochures that Alice passed out on the wagon. I won't go over the wagon. I came to Columbus on June 16th of 1980, and I noticed the brochure says that George Hasey died April 28th of 1980. So I missed meeting George Hasey by about 6 weeks. He was quite a man, and we have quite a legacy in this wagon. Quite a number of people throughout Columbus worked in the area worked to bring that wagon back in 1996. And the Columbus Popcorn Wagon, Inc. is a for-profit corporation, and you're going to say, well, why is it a for-profit corporation? Because you basically operate this by volunteers, and why aren't you a 501c3? When Ms. Bullard made the proposal to people in Columbus that she wanted us to buy the wagon, we didn't have enough time to go through the 501c3 process, and so we formed a corporation and offered stock, and the stock was purchased by members of the community. This was in 1996. The economy was going quite well, but we didn't have enough money, and the end of the year was coming up, and we had to make a deal by the end of 1996. So fortunately, a very philanthropic couple in the community came through and donated money to the Columbus Downtown Development Corporation. Excuse me, they didn't donate money, they offered stock to the Columbus Downtown Development Corporation as a charitable write-off, and the Downtown Development Corporation pooled their money with the popcorn wagon, and we were able to buy the wagon. So that's how the wagon got back here in 1986, and we're proud to have our 21st annual shareholders meeting this coming September 16th. And we'll be at the library, be noticed in the paper. You'll be welcome to attend. It's a shareholders meeting, and on our agenda we would like to present to the shareholders the idea of donating the wagon to the community, to Columbus. I believe the intent when the wagon was brought back was that it stay here permanently. It has had a number of different places where it's been located over the last 20 years. Alice can speak as to some of that. I will just say that its business model that George Hasey had back 100 years ago is not the business model that works in the 21st century. So it is an antique. It is something that we want to donate to the city. I've met with Mayor Tome and Mr. Van der Zanden, and so has Alice, to explore the possibility of it being on the first floor of the pavilion. The chairperson of the Historic Preservation Commission, Carolyn, is here tonight to speak as to all the great work that entity and all of you have done to preserve the pavilion over the last couple of years with elevators and handicap accessible bathrooms and future projects that are ongoing for the building. We thought that it would be best on the first floor in the area on the south side where people have their wedding receptions. I happen to have my wedding reception in that building on the first floor. and in the corner it'd be tucked away, and we have some money set aside for security that we can work with members of DPW and the city staff to make sure it's secure and safe. We've talked to Dennis Bukta. We fortunately have the same type of insurance with the same agent that the city has, and so we've explored those ideas. And thanks to Alice's connections, we have people that are willing to donate their time in getting the wagon into we think there's about an inch to spare if you take the tires off and put it on skids to get it into the wagon, in the pavilion. We think it'd be an attraction. I think Carolyn will speak to the availability of the pavilion, the usage of the pavilion, because of its status now as a historic landmark and its elevators, and it's used more often. This will be an attraction that people can see, and we would not isolate it. People would still be able to come in, look at it, study it, but it is a very, very well-recognized part of our community. So Alice, I don't know if you want to speak for a few minutes about the 20 years that it's been in the community and some of its places where it's been located.
Alan shared his George Hasey story. I think mine is funnier. George and Ruth Hasey's daughter, Catherine, was born June 29th, 1931. I was born July 4th, 1931. So, Catherine Hasey and I shared minutes in the nursery of the hospital. And in those days, mothers stayed and babies stayed in the hospital for about 2 weeks. It came time for Ruth Hasey to take her daughter Catherine home. She went into the nursery, picked up her baby, started dressing her baby, and the nun in charge of the nursery came in and said, "No, no, Mrs. Hasey, that is the little Schmidt girl." So I almost knew George Hasey a lot better than I did. I was not a part of the initial group to bring the wagon home. But in 1998, at the annual meeting, I was elected to serve on the board. And it has been an up and down number of years. We've had many good opportunities to raise funds to take care of that wagon. We've had lots of work the most recent years. In 2002, Elton and Bernetta Mather donated $60,000 to CDDC Main Street for a building. They donated the building, but it needed much revitalization and restoration and all the kinds of things that it needed, which cost CDDC an amount of money. I've heard people say, well, you got the gift of the building. Yeah, they got the gift of the building, which they had to mortgage to continue to do their share. But Bernetta and Elton and Judy Goodson, who was then the Main Street manager, had a great idea as well. You see, they set it up so that whoever rented 128 West James Street from CDDC Main Street also paid the Columbus Popcorn Wagon Board $150 a month for its presence there. So in 2003, 2004, that worked beautifully. 2005, the tenant said, hey, it's working, but I'm not making any money. So it was reduced to $125. In those days, we didn't worry about money to support the popcorn wagon. We only took it out for the 4th of July and a few other minor things. It was smooth sailing. 2005, 2006, 4 months of 2007, we were on the gravy train. Then it stopped. because the CDDC Main Street had difficulty getting people to rent the building, and then they had their part-time manager, Kim Bates, in the building. And we stopped thinking about money for the popcorn wagon, and we started going to work. From 2007 through 2014, we never broke even. We have to pay insurance, property and liability insurance, and since we're a for-profit, we also have to pay workman's compensation. That, paying our income taxes and sales tax, amounts to about $1,500 a year at the present time. In 2007, we started going to work, and board members have worked very hard. In 2015, we almost made it. We were within $100 of breaking even. We were even able to put a little money back into our savings account. And now I'm going to brag. In 2016, we not only broke even, we had about $100 more than we needed to go into savings. It's been a job. And at our February meeting this year, when we were talking about the beginning of another year, my wish was that the city would consider taking this wagon, because I knew that with CHLPC in charge, the wagon would be well cared for, it would be treasured, it would be loved, and it would be accessible to the people of Columbus, which hasn't been really true for the last couple of years. So I'm here to simply say, hey, please consider our request. I would love later this year to watch that wagon sailing into the pavilion, being placed by Carolyn Fredericks in a place where it would be accessible to all, surrounded by possibly an area that would protect it. And I'd love to think that long after I'm gone, the people of Columbus will be able to come and look at that popcorn wagon, consider it, read its story, and realize it is a true treasure to the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice. So that's what we have before us, basically, right, Patrick? To summarize, this is accepting on behalf of the city this donation, and it sounds like there'd be some funds coming along as much as possible for helping secure the popcorn wagon at the first floor of the pavilion. I don't know if all that's been decided or if that's part of what we're doing tonight.
About the location, or?
Correct.
We've discussed a few ideas, but I think one of the things that was brought up by Al and Alice was about HLPC being the stewards of the popcorn wagon, and with their knowledge of the pavilion would find the appropriate spot for
And
it.
the space. I mean, it's
Correct.
got considerable space to take that, so. Anybody have questions or comments on this? Andy?
I was curious, so, how how we would approach securing the structure, or, securing it. Like, we'll
Like, what are we
put up
talking
some,
about?
like, partition, like some, plexiglass, or something like that. I mean, you want to be able to still see it, but you don't want people touching it. Or too
Mr.
much.
Stroschein?
Can you walk around it?
One of our past board members and one of my neighbors and former council people is George Jordan, and George is a retired engineer. And George actually designed the location at 128 West James Street, the facade improvements that went into that so the wagon could go into that building. And he painstakingly went through some of the parts for the wagon and everything. He's quite a resource for our organization, and he's volunteered to come back and work on that. But our concept is it would be plexiglass or whatever, maybe 2 or 3 feet high of something solid, but then plexiglass, maybe not unlike the cage where Patrick Van Zandt has his office. I'm sorry, Patrick, that was a low blow, but it was prior administration. It was prior administration, and you got the benefit of it. But something that you can see, you can observe, but you can't touch unless you have the door, and then you come in and you're presented. Something like that. And Alice, we have about 4,000 or what?
We have $4,200 in savings and $2,000 in our checking account right now, and no bills coming in.
All right.
Yeah. So, and one thing I want to say, and I don't know if this is being taped or whatnot, but the support in particular of the Columbus Boy Scouts has been instrumental these last several years with selling popcorn at the 4th of July celebration and the fireworks. Has been just a godsend to us because we're a very small, hands-on group of people, and we've worked at different events, but that by far has been our best fundraising vehicle. But that's a good question, Andy, that you had, and that concerns us too, because it does get a lot of people in that building, and the people in the building that you can't have it policed at all times.
No one there.
Right. Right, what's going to happen?
Thank
Anything
you.
else?
I, for one, am in favor of this opportunity, and I think it'd be a great way to preserve some of our local history, which is obviously important to our community. I'm not sure. Matt?
I guess it's kind of springboard off of Andy's question about protecting it. You said you talked to the insurance guy who's the same one for the city. I guess what kind of addition will we see onto the policy for the city? I mean, is it going to be a blip on the radar? Or, I mean, it's kind of priceless. I don't know about whatever a replacement cost for this would be.
Can I answer that? I checked with Darlene and Bruce Anderson, who are the people that know the Dunbar popcorn wagons. And they said that if we wanted to attempt to sell it, our range would be between $15,000 and $25,000 for insurance value. And so that should handle any boost in your insurance. I recommend insuring it for $25,000.
Andy?
I was just going to say I'll agree with you, Reagan. This is something that we should do.
Okay. We've got a couple of folks in favor of moving this forward, so.
Yes.
All right. I think with that, Patrick, we'll take this as a good sign and move it forward to the regular meeting.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you guys very much, and Alice, very much appreciated your history on that, entertaining and insightful, so thank you. All right. Item number 6, consider a resolution requesting exemption from Columbia County library tax. This is pretty much perfunctory. We do this every year. If anyone's got questions or concerns, feel free to offer those now. Mike, Mayor Tome.
Make a motion to take number 6 and 7 forward to the next regular meeting for consideration. This is just general housekeeping.
Second.
All right. We go voice vote on, or roll call or voice vote? Voice. Let's do voice vote on that one. All in favor of moving this forward to the committee, or to the regular meeting, items 6 and 7 regarding the Columbia County and Dodge County library taxes. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none, moves forward. Thank you, Mayor Tome. Number 8, consider an agreement with Whole Body Strong for use of city soccer fields for youth soccer. I don't think we have anybody from Recreation Department here to speak to this, but Paul Jenko runs Whole Body Strong soccer program, and he'd like to enter into an agreement with the city of Columbus for use of Meister Park for his scheduled games. Whole Body Strong is a very good organization in this town. My kids have belonged to it before as well, and currently this would follow the standard agreement that we have with other activities and sporting groups, which is $5 per participant from the roster of Whole Body Strong. Contract details are to be worked out, but basically looking to get get our blessing, so to speak, on this one to move it forward.
Yep, that's exactly it.
I just wanted to ask a question for clarity. The $5 per participant, that's just a once a year?
Correct.
Based on the number? Okay.
Yep.
Yep, and it goes to covering the cost of lining and mowing and keeping the facilities open, such as the bathrooms and things like that.
Right.
Yeah, we have a sort of a boilerplate agreement with the football organization, the baseball, softball, be
Yeah.
something very similar.
Yeah, I don't see any kind of hiccups coming down as far as working a contract with Paul and his folks at Whole Body Strong. So I'm in favor of moving it forward to the regular meeting, except Mr. Malat, you have something?
Yeah, does the softball and baseball, do they practice on the diamonds here in Columbus?
Yes,
Do they pay for those?
they pay.
They pay
Yes.
for each night for each practice?
No,
or
they pay
something?
$5 per participant.
Once
But that's not for practicing. They don't need the fields lined for practice.
Oh,
The
okay.
maintenance is basically for the games. You got to mow it, you got to line it, that kind of thing.
Okay, excellent, thanks.
Mayor Tome?
You already touched on this, but I wanted to make sure that we are clear if we move this forward, whether you wanted to go to the committee of the whole or the regular meeting, since we don't have a contract here. It seems like this memo kind of alludes to the fact that this is going to happen. The contract hasn't been signed, and we're.
And there's a time pressure at this point, I think. I would personally feel comfortable kind of changing the procedure and going straight to the regular meeting, which isn't unheard of in cases like this. So, again, I don't foresee any pitfalls with the contract wording or negotiation. Regan, do you have something?
I was just gonna agree with you.
Okay. I always like that. All right. With that, we will bring this forward. We don't need any kind of vote or anything on this, correct? All right, thank you, folks. All right, next is item number 9, consider contract for the TIF number 4 utility extension project. City engineer Jason Leith is here to walk us through that. Welcome.
Thank you. Well, I have some good news tonight. As we anticipated for our utility extensions for TIF 4, our bids came back with some very favorable numbers. We had a lot of interest, which again we thought might appeal to contractors, being the time of year and the type of work. And so we opened up bids last week on Thursday, and we were very fortunate to have 10 bidders. I can say this is the first time in 10 years of doing projects for the city we've had that number. We've had some very good qualified bidders, which also was very good to see. And we are proposing to recommend forest landscaping and construction for this project. Their bid was in the amount of $727,289. Just for comparison, and I did look through some information here, and I wanted to give you guys just kind of a benchmark. Our estimate was $896,000 for engineering estimate. So if you look at the bidders, we fell pretty much right in the middle of the pack. So again, I think we had some very favorable bids. As far as the contractors bidding this, Forest Landscaping and Construction, although their name implies landscaping, they do a lot of underground type work, reconstruction type work. They've done some various projects for the city over the years. They did the Main Street project, which I feel went very well. They also did North Water Street project several years ago, and I feel that went well as well. A very responsive contractor, local to Lake Mills area. So again, I think that we've had decent luck with them, and I was pleased to see the low bid. So, any questions on the recommendation? Oh, there were 2 alternates in here, just in case you are wondering. We have a section of pipe as part of the force main and the water main that we have to cross a small creek, if you're familiar with the area out there, that drains under Highway 16. The reason these alternate bids are in there is we looked at an alternate pipe material to see if there was a cost advantage or a savings for that. It was a high-density polyethylene versus a fusible PVC. We actually prefer the fusible PVC, and it did come in cheaper. So we saved probably, I think, the neighborhood of $20-some thousand using the material that we wanted to use. So what we're doing is we're just kind of tossing out the alternates and not considering them at this time. So we're just recommending the base bid, which had in our preferred option, which was the fusible PVC for that.
Okay. So to clarify, this 727,000 and changes with the fusible pipe that you prefer?
Yep, correct.
Cool. Thank you very much, Jason. Questions, concerns? Mr. Kenny?
Jason, the note, the review did not include any evaluation of bidder's current financial conditions. No concerns on that? I'm assuming this is going to be a, bonded and all that kind of jazz for this project?
No, certainly they have to be able to bond for this, which they're capable of doing. They provide the bid bond, and obviously they'll be required to provide the performance and payment bonds for the contract execution. Forest Landscaping has been around, well,
Long time.
they've been around a long time. I've been familiar with them, obviously since '07. So for 10 years, I've worked with them, not just in Columbus, but other communities as well. So again, I know they're certainly capable of doing projects in the several $1 million range.
Yeah.
This one's, quite a bit less. So.
No concerns on you guys, even though you just didn't check into it, but no concerns.
There's nothing, certainly they're not debarred. They're not on any lists for violations, safety violations. We don't, we don't have any record of that either. So normally we'll check that before we execute the final contract, but at this point I'm comfortable at least making this recommendation.
Anyone else? Mr. Tome?
When is the expected start date for this project?
The contractor told me Thursday, as soon as you want. So he's ready to go. He has it available in his schedule. Just as a tentative timeline, we just received approval on, we have 3 permits out there. We're anticipating 2 shortly. We just received 1 today. I would hope by the time we get final approval, the 19th, I believe, is on the agenda. We would probably be able to certainly secure the contract shortly after that, have a pre-construction meeting. I'm guessing somewhere around the 1st of October would be what I would hope for as a start date.
Anyone else? All right. Well, thank you for your work on this, Jason. I think we're ready to move this forward with the recommendation for the Forest Landscaping and Construction Incorporation bid. Maybe we can hit that October 1st target date, so we'll see how it comes along. So that'll move forward to 9/19 meeting. All right. Mr. Leith is staying put. We have to consider, we need the update on Hall Road construction and the T grant.
So we put this one on there because I certainly wanted to give you guys an update on the progress and the status. And then obviously there's some points of discussion that we'd like to have and kind of get some direction from the council. Certainly it doesn't need to take place tonight, but in the near future, we'd like to obviously run some things by you and get some direction so we can move forward with the design on the road. So last week as well, we had kind of, I wouldn't call it the kickoff meeting, but it was kind of a mandatory meeting with all the powers that be. The DOT had several representatives from the T-Grant program. The city had representatives. Fromm and Drexel were part of the phone call as well. And so there was a discussion about the grant submittal process. I think what we realized in that is we are way ahead of where the DOT presumes we start. We've done this before. We've had a lot of pieces here in place that we've been working on that we know that we need or want. And so it was pretty clear we were ahead of the game. The T-Grant application, we will be working on getting that actually executed and filled in. Kim will be working with Drexel for the job guarantees and getting the financial pieces put together for that. So that's going to be ongoing here in the near future. The piece that kind of brings me up here tonight is the engineering side. As part of the Hall Road extension plan, there are a few little pieces that we just kind of have to, I guess, go through and discuss and just get some feedback on from the council. Also, one of the things that came after our meeting last week was I received a call from Art at the DOT. He is one of the program engineers as part of this. He's actually promoted to supervisor, but he's still kind of handling this T grant process. And Art had indicated to me that as part of this long-term plan for this area, the DOT has always been proposing, and it's certainly no secret to them or us, that they've been looking at terminating the intersection of Columbus Fall River Road with State Highway 16. Essentially, this Hall Road provides the infrastructure to do that. Although we've been aware of that, we've discussed it, we haven't really had a lot of conversation of to when that would happen. They had indicated to me last week that they want that to be now. The sooner the better as far as they're concerned, because this alleviates the congestion and the concern for the traffic entering the highway at that point. As part of that discussion, my first question is it T-grant eligible? There's going to be some costs associated with the severing of the roadway. And their response was likely yes, but we'll have to confirm that. So we're hopeful, obviously, that that could be worked into the Hall Road project. There probably will be some added costs. At this point, I believe because of the existing right-of-way that's available and the road with some access that has been rectified or addressed in the previous phase of the Duffy construction, I think that the cost to terminate Columbus Fall River Road is relatively inexpensive. I think it would just be a short separation between the State Highway 16 and a cul-de-sac that we would build at the end of Columbus Fall River Road. I certainly wouldn't recommend removing the entire roadway north to Hall Road. We still have a residence that's actually in the town there. We still have Duffy that will take access off of Columbus Fall River Road. At such time that those properties are developed, or if things change, I think that would be the time to actually decide if that cul-de-sac would move further north, or if Duffy wanted to combine that all and have the city vacate property back. That could be possible. There's a lot of what ifs, I think, down the road. So we've kind of focused on how we would terminate that road, and again, I think it would be very close to the intersection. There would be some pavement removal, probably some curb along 16 or a ditch line or something, just to kind of separate it so there wouldn't be any access available there. And so anyways, I just want to kind of throw that out there tonight and get some reaction back to see if that's an issue with the council. Certainly we would have to work with the town. We know the DOT supports it if it's grant eligible. There's some costs there. We could do it without vacating or changing property ownership or right of way. I think it could be pretty straightforward in my mind, but it would certainly be something that we would have to address with the state. My other question is, what if we don't like that idea? What if the city says no? And they said, well, that's really not an option. However, we could discuss it, and if it wasn't going to be terminated at this point, they would definitely want to have some kind of a sunset or some kind of a future determination of when that would occur developed as part of this SMA, the state municipal agreement that you'll be signing as part of the T grant, to basically make sure that that'll happen in the future. So their first preference obviously was to terminate it as part of this project, and I think by providing the T grant funding, I think that's the impetus for doing it. So I know that's kind of a lot to digest, but that's kind of one of the pieces that's evolved since last week, late when we had our meeting. So I don't know if anybody's got any questions on that piece. Strong feelings, one way.
Mr. Tone?
I think it's pretty obvious that the DOT wants to close that off. At the Plan Commission, when we were talking about the conditional use permit, there were some questions from members there about the way the new extension on Fall, or the new extension for Hall Road would line up with Columbus Fall River Road. And I was wondering if it would even be possible to consider keeping Columbus Fall River Road, but just using it as an exit for trucks to get to that area, but not having trucks get back on the highway. Would that be something the DOT would want to see, or they just want to eliminate the entire possibility of any traffic entering Columbus Fall River Road there as well?
Well, I'm sure that that's something that I haven't brought up, so it's plausible. I would guess their preference is obviously to close it. So, I mean, it certainly could be something that could be question.
Or maybe it could be part of the transition, I guess, to actually closing it or putting a cul-de-sac in. My concern there is for like, I guess Duffy, instead of having to go all the way around through Columbus Fall, or the Hall Road extension, depending upon that turning radius that's gonna be created there, it would still allow them to bring their trucks in off 1660 to their facility and then go back around out the other way, but it's just,
And I think what you do by introducing an access point, whether it's entrance only, what you do is you could design it to be entrance only, but if you don't, you'll provide a right in, right out type scenario, and obviously the acceleration of the trucks after the signal would probably pose a concern. So, there are several places where you can basically design to force traffic as a right in only. We see that up on Highway 51 north by the airport, and some of the medians there, they've done that, where they'll allow traffic to enter only, but they'll force a curbed turn so people can't come from the other direction and exit. So yeah, I think there's some things that could be a compromise, but as strongly as they had started out in the conversation with me, I would guess that their position is to close it.
sure, and the cost may exceed redesigning it compared to just putting.
Exactly. I mean, put a modified intersection in there could easily far exceed just, terminating it, as far as complexity and, design, so.
Okay, thanks.
Matt?
In all of our discussions about the TIF and the T grant, it's been about Hall Road, and for me, I see that this is kind of something being added on at the end. From a city standpoint, I think it'd be pushing back a little bit and saying that if this is what they want, qualifying this as T grant money seems a bit of a tacking something on, and maybe like a scope creep, as we would say, Us removing Columbus Forward Road access doesn't do anything for the city, but it does obviously help DOT. So I'd push against it a little bit. Couldn't hurt.
Sure.
Maybe see if, Hyssop or they're doing, 16 interchange here pretty soon. Maybe it's part of that. Wouldn't hurt, but I don't know. I mean, we're tight the way it is on money for Hall Road and for the TIF 4 anyways. Might as well just try to keep every penny in-house we can. So, my 2 cents.
I'd agree with that. Clarify though, they're not looking to terminate Hall Road as it extends, or Columbus Fall River Road, excuse me, as it extends behind and into Fall River on, I can't remember the first access road into Fall River. They'll keep that. They'll just stop it from having direct access to State Highway 16.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I would say, Matt, every point you bring is absolutely valid, and I think time's still on our side. So if you can't control nothing else in negotiation, you can try to control time. Yeah.
Okay, no, that's perfectly fine, and I can report back and just see what kind of response we get.
Perfect.
I have to check back to see if they're even gonna allow it to be grant eligible in the first place, and obviously there's a SMA that'll come later that, will be, whether they're gonna have some clause in there as far as, future termination of Hall Road, that'll all, I guess, have to be worked out too, so.
Thank you.
All right, well, I got a couple other things, so I don't wanna move you guys on too quickly here. As part of this Hall Road design, it's a new roadway construction ordinances require us to put sidewalks and curbs from your chapter 90 onto new construction. Obviously understanding where this road is, it's connecting obviously, two rule sections, if you will, calling State Highway 16 a rural section. I guess it's a state highway. But there is no curb and gutter out there, no true drainage sections where we're channeling water on the pavement. There is no connection of sidewalk there. I do know that we've looked at other areas that don't have sidewalk that are further out that we know are going to be connected. But I guess the question for the council tonight is, it's not required as part of the T grant. It's not required as part of the new roadway construction. And really that decision lies with you guys as to, do you want to install sidewalks out there at this time, and I'm going to start with sidewalks, but I'm also going to lump curb and gutter on that. We could easily put in a rural section which matches the surrounding streets. Hall Road with curb and gutter will have, just curb for about 1,000 feet. It's 1,000 foot of roadway, the new extension is. And so just to have that 1,000 foot of curb and gutter there, we can use it to, to contain the drainage and to convey it, but it won't have curb and gutter on either Columbus Fall River Road or State Highway 16 theoretically for some time in the future. So just kind of a couple ideas there that I want to throw out and, verify some direction. If we build it per the ordinance, we have to be 32 feet wide on pavement, so it's a wider road section. We have to put curb and gutter in, and we have to put sidewalk in. If we do not put sidewalk in, we save about $55,000 on the tab. If we do not put curb and gutter in, we save about $36,000. Now, I know it's not always just about the money, but I also wanted to kind of bring that to your attention, just to kind of look at some numbers and, kind of weigh the options here, and see if it's feasible to put in a rural section or an urban section, if you will. This will be obviously served by Fromm to the north. They said in the future they may take access off a Hall Road. They haven't committed to doing that. I believe at some point they will. But again, their property remains, fairly undeveloped. They have a lot of green space around it. And then Drexel will be, the building supply lot. And you've probably seen the plans. It'll be basically a large lot with a lot of storage areas in it. And so fitting in with the theme out there, kind of the rural section with no curb and gutter or sidewalk would seem appropriate, but yet, it's contrary to what Chapter 90 says. So I just want to kind of get a sense for what the thoughts of the council was, versus what the ordinance said, versus, what costs would be, and try and find the best solution fit to make sense of what, we can do out there as a design standpoint. These are decisions we'll have to know on an engineering side so we can move forward and get design to a point where we can submit with the T grant. Our goal is to get it to what they call 30% plans, but we have to have a typical section, a profile. We have to have it kind of laid out so we can submit it with the grant application. I can tell you the number that was provided early on did include curb and gutter, but I did not put sidewalks in there. Because of not having the connections. So at this point, there's obviously some savings on curb and gutter from that original estimate. There also will be some savings on pavement. We're required to design to the DOT standards for a rural section. So we don't have to make the road quite as wide as we would necessarily make it when we put in an urban section with curb. So there are some variabilities here that we can do to design. I don't think it gives a degraded product or a lesser street out there, but it is some features that will impact cost and impact obviously a decision versus what's in the ordinance. So
Can you go over the cost per sidewalk again, your estimate, and curb and gutter? Was it 55 and 35 roughly?
about, yes.
Okay.
I had 55 and 36 were just
Okay.
some loose numbers I threw in there. There's likely also going to be, and I didn't quantify this, but if we don't put in curb and gutter, we won't have inlets for storm sewers. We likely won't have manholes. We may have some culvert pipes, but I suspect we'll see a reduction in actual storm pipe costs too, in structure costs. And so I didn't quantify that yet, but again, the design is really depending on how you guys want to go, and I confirm that up once I have a little more direction,
Okay.
or at least a feel for, how you guys want me to kind of proceed, and I can bring more information back.
When was the, I believe it's TIF 3, where Century Ace is, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Curb and gutter, streetlights, the whole shebang, sidewalk. When was that built, for those of us who are newer to this? Rough ballpark.
This is when we can really use Ann. When it was built, it was shortly after I started, so.
12?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it started in 12 with phase 1, and I
Right.
think phase 2 finished up in 13 or something like that, 13, 14.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I think it'd be hard for us to go with not following what's going on in TIF 3. We kind of changed the game. As far as I understand from, I believe, previous plan commission, when we split the parcel for somebody's daughter's farm, something or other, the idea, I think, being that they're planning on selling off the rest of that chunk for development at some point, correct? The idea being that there would be a subdivision out in that area.
And it would change the character of the.
It would change the character, and that's between Dubourg and what would be Hall Road, technically, correct?
Hall Road on the other side.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess if the idea is that we're bringing jobs into the community, if we're going to be ped-friendly in our downtown doing other stuff with our projects, why wouldn't we continue that mindset? people living in that area walking to work at Fromm or Drexel. My 2 cents, but you all know I'm biased in some ways too, so.
That's an interesting point you bring up about future character changes to the area, because before that, my initial reaction would be that it's something that we could get away from in that area because it is heavily industrial and that like, but that's a very good point you bring up, that that's all ag land that could be parceled off in the near future, so.
Sorry, I mean, I guess it is worth conversation too that, if we do put in curb and gutter and sidewalk like any other community member, we would be assessing, a certain amount of money to them I paid it myself. So it would benefit the property owner in some way based on drainage or anything along those lines. That could be a conversation we can have too, but.
Definitely something more to consider as far as funding source and everything like that, so. Regan?
Yeah, I would just be in favor of sidewalks as well and maintaining the same look as we have across the street. There's actual foot traffic now, even though there's no pedestrian crossing allowed. I think for future planning, it's a good idea.
Mayor Tome?
I think for clarification, in the developer's agreement, there is no requirement for them to put sidewalks in, if I remember, so I don't think we're going to be special assessing any of this back to anybody out there for the sidewalks or the curb and gutter. It's going to be our expense. So, well, I think having a more of a long-term view, like you're talking about, Matt, is looking at if there's future development out there. I think there are probably appropriate places where you would consider that, and I think for Hall Road, where it's going, that seems to be pretty much solely industrial development, and I can't see residential happening on that side. So I guess since this is all our expense, when you start looking at $100,000 in savings for infrastructure we're putting out there for development, I would hope that we could at least look at that possible savings and say, well, it makes sense here because it's retail or it's residential. The Shopko area is retail. There's parking lots there, but I think when we look at Fromm and Drexel, the retail part of it's going to be very small at Drexel, and there's not going to be a whole lot of transition from one place to another. That's just my 2 cents. So, and $91,000 is a lot of money if we're talking about terminating Columbus Fall River Road. That may be potential savings right there where we could get that done as well if there's some matching key grant funds that go with it. So,
Rod?
I agree with Mike on this one. I think the only times the sidewalks would be used out there would be for the employees doing their little walk at lunch or something to get some exercise. I don't see a lot of homes going up in that area to utilize a sidewalk, and we would save about $90,000.
Matt?
Would it behoove us at least to consider grading out in preparation for future? I'm just thinking that the whole idea is that we're expanding in that direction right now. That's what it looks like. We do have building in other parts of the community, but it seems like there's not a lot of available space left for development. So I guess, it's kind of hedge our
talking
bets or
residential
rolling the
development?
dice as to where it's going to happen next. I know it seems silly now, but I think long-term, if you're going to be,
I just have a question for you.
yeah, sure.
Are you referring to residential development?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, if the idea is to try to be walkable and multimodal. I know that it's a big conversation about industrial having sidewalk. It seems silly for people walking around, but self-driving cars here pretty soon. Maybe we're going to start walking again. It seems silly, but it's just trying to look long-term and.
No, I think it's smart to consider that and take pause, and we
Yeah.
obviously
And I
don't
know
have to
it's-
provide an answer this evening, so
Yeah.
it seems like we all have food for thought, but Andy?
Yeah, I think at this time, I don't think we really need sidewalks out there, but I like what you're saying, Matt, that we should consider, doing what we need to do to make sure that that is something that can be done, without extra work or extra expense. If there's anything else we can do ahead of time, that'd be smart.
Mayor Tome?
Matt, I like your approach. I get it. You said, possibly grading now. I think in a more long-term approach, there's going to be less ability to have obstructions in the area where if we start seeing residential development out maybe on the other side of the road in 5 or 10 years, you've already got right-of-way on the highway. You've got room to do that, but I think when you get into residential areas where you start skipping sidewalks and you've got utilities and trees and power boxes, if we kind of have that approach to say we want to make sure we keep these right-of-ways clear because there's a potential for sidewalks down the road, this is a good time to look at it that way. I just think that putting the sidewalks in prematurely until that residential stuff comes, you don't really know where the appropriate place to put is. And if it was a few $1,000s, it would be a different story, but I think at, $90,000 potential savings, I'd rather just kind of put plans there and say, okay, we've got room for sidewalks and curb and gutter, and we can improve that when we get to that point, I guess. But I appreciate your approach. I don't necessarily disagree with you to have that consistency, long-term consistency.
Just say it, Mike. Say no.
Rod?
And one last thing, I agree with you also. I love, pedestrian traffic is the way of the future almost. But in Vista Circle, we had a lot of sidewalks put in and then houses built, and then they have to redo the sidewalks because all the trucks drive over the sidewalks and break them all up, so they had to put the sidewalks in twice. So until we start getting some building out there, maybe we should wait on the sidewalks.
That's a really good alternative, though, to at least kind of prep and grade and have that idea planted, if nothing else. I'm not sure if we really have a consensus on this or if you've got much direction from us. It kind of seems like an even split to me.
Do you have any input, Jason, on the idea of prepping for future, or will you just go with a straight rural section and deal with it maybe potentially in the 20 or 30 years we might redo the road anyways?
I think prepping for sidewalks is a little tough with the understanding that the rural section is going to require some roadside ditching, so we'll have some stormwater conveyance. I mean, if it's not like we're going to build up the terraces and have it all ready to go, we could, but theoretically we'd have to understand where the curb would be in the future and then likely pull the curb in closer to the road and keep the ditches a little further out. The good thing is we're talking an 80-foot right-of-way here, which is a little more generous than normal. So I think we have a little room to play here. We do have some features where we may end up shifting the road. We're doing that much similar with the utilities. We're designing Hall Road and with the utilities in mind, not necessarily sanitary. We don't expect that to get extended to the east, but we do expect water to be looped to the east at some future date, and we're actually going to stub that out from underneath the road so it can actually be extended in the future without disturbing the road. So there's things like that we can certainly take a look at. I just kind of want to get the general consensus or feel for the group here, because at some point we're just going to have to pick a cross section and just start designing off of, not that saying that we can't come back and change it, but I certainly don't want to get too far down the road before we do that. So not obviously looking for a decision tonight, but maybe we can put this back on the agenda for some more discussion at the next meeting.
Some numbers.
And, yeah, we can get some numbers. We can get maybe some sketches or something so you guys can see this a little more detail, and then we can kick it around again and get maybe a little clearer direction at that meeting, and that will give you guys some time to think about it. I just want to kind of throw it out there tonight and get you guys thinking, talking.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think it was a good move, and so I in favor of bringing it back to the next cow. Or how long do you think you'd need to prep some numbers and sketches? I mean, it doesn't seem like it'd
I can get it back to the next cow pretty easily.
I thought you probably want to keep it moving.
We're kind of sitting right now on the profile and the alignments, but we haven't put a typical cross section to it yet because we were kind of waiting to get some general design consensus. But we can pull together something fairly quickly for that meeting. So.
I don't know if I'm stealing your thunder for the next point. I guess if we're doing curb and gutter and sidewalk street lighting,
What about it?
Going to not put that in as well, or are we going to put that in?
No, we have that in the budget. I assume that we would obviously, we would obviously want it lit at the intersections
But for the full stretch of, I guess, the rest.
Right,
of the
for the full stretch, we could consider reducing the number of lights. I think we had 4 in now, which is much less lit than what we would see, on the new James Street. But with that being said, we could certainly knock that down a little bit and just, look at the intersections primarily. There's always a debate about how much you light. There's obviously standards. The DOT will obviously require us to light, but I think we could probably reduce that number down and get a bare minimum level in there. And that's kind of what we had thought with the 4 lights over the 1,000 feet we would be able to do. So, and that was in the budget. All the lighting was accounted for, so.
Mayor Tome?
Two questions, Jason. So I guess if, say in 10 years, we start to see residential development occurring out that way, I don't know when that portion of 1660 is due for reconstruction, but is that something at that time the state would look at to see how development is occurring, and would the state be the driver in kind of converting that from an urban section to more of a rural section to an urban section where they would want to see sidewalks, et cetera, curb and gutter in an area where there's more development occurring, or residential development or commercial?
Well, I think that's highly dependent upon, obviously, the DOT and the state budget process and when that would be redone. That's outside our connecting limits, so we don't even really have a whole lot of say in that. If you remember several years ago, they did a mill and overlay on that section of 16. So they've obviously invested some money in that, probably, I want to say it's 4 years ago now. I know they invested some money. As that development would occur, I mean, in a realistic timeline, if it's not started now, there won't be houses out there in the next 2 to 3 years. We'd have to see the planning, and there's a lot of infrastructure to get there. That development that lies west of 16 is going to take some significant funds to develop from a developer, so somebody's going to have to be committed to drive that. When I say that, there's some fairly high costs in getting water extended, looped underneath 16, as well as sanitary. There's a lot of steep grades out there, so there's going to be some definite grading costs. And so I don't see that as a prime piece of land that would develop. Obviously, it is in the capacity of somebody to do, and it's within the city limits. But I would think that certainly, when that time would come, the question would really be, where's the DOT in the process of the Highway 16 reconstruct, and what's driving that? I think there would need to be some larger development, say if, and I'm just going to throw it out there, say if the school was going to relocate out there, or if there was some major piece of development that would drive it, I think then it's much more likely. Pedestrian traffic across Highway 16 is virtually non-existent. I would never expect that to be. I mean, you certainly wouldn't even want to lead people there with a sidewalk system. So the idea of them crossing over to use the sidewalks on the New Hall Road, I would think it would be much more likely that people at the travel center or some of the land that we have in the TIF that hasn't developed yet would be using these sidewalks. But again, I think it would be more local than connected. Not saying that there's sidewalks obviously that'll connect the travel center as soon as the middle section gets reconstructed underneath 151. Have that full connection out there. But then again, what's the destination? If you're going to Shopko or you're going to the travel center, that seems to be a destination because of the retail component of it. But again, walking to work or biking to work is possible, but I'm thinking it's a little less likely. So
the other thing too is just if we're going to follow up with this, if you could maybe get firmer numbers as far as Plan A, Plan B, and
Yep.
the exact cost differences. We're probably looking at estimates, but when you mention stormwater and all those other things, but I think having tighter numbers would help people make decisions too.
Sure.
Thank you.
we can easily do that. I got one more thing on TIF or on Hall Road before we move on. I knew this was going to barrage you guys. There is a storm pipe that we have discussed in the development agreement with Drexel that will convey the water from Hall Road to the future pond to the south. If you remember, we went through some cost-sharing scenarios of how we were going to do that, and Paul spent a lot of time wording things just the way we wanted them. With that said, the first question after the development agreement was signed was Drexel called me up and said, when are you putting in that pipe? And I said, well, with the road, and that will be next year because we're not going to do the road, and we'll design it over winter and get the T-grant funds. And they said, well, we want to break ground October 1st. Well, I don't know how likely that is, obviously, with the site plan approvals. But, so I told them, well, obviously the idea was the city would put it in and then bill them for the upsized cost, and then they would reimburse the city. So there's a little discussion about the timing on that, and if they're going to do the grading and put in their parking lot, they'd like to pipe in sooner than later. The one thing that I did come up with as a possible solution, and I wanted to kind of throw that out there tonight, is being we do have on the agenda tonight for the approval of the TIF4 utility extensions, we have a contractor that's very capable of putting pipe in the ground that will be out there all fall doing work. And that could be a piece that we could hopefully get designed by that point, and then potentially change order that process into their contract. Now, that pipe cost wouldn't necessarily be a competitive bid, but we could certainly address it, and we could either accept it or reject it at that time if we thought the prices were favorable or not. And I guess kind of cross that bridge when we get there. It'll be a cost you'll be doing either in the spring, or we could move it up to this fall. But either way, it'll be a cost that we'll have to address. To me, it doesn't matter which plan set or which contractor it goes in with. We don't really know the contractor for the spring yet. And that contractor obviously will have some pipe work for culverts and possibly storm sewer as well. So logistically, I think it could go in at either time. I guess it's just trying to accommodate Drexel and their timing a little more than if we just held off and came back in, say they had their site all ready to go and we came in and dug it all up. There probably would be more cost for restoration, I would think, or you know, once they had their site done and say gravelled or whatever it would be, we may have some more cost for pipe installation at that time. So I want to kind of throw that out there and see what your thoughts are. If, you know, certainly we aren't making a decision tonight, I can get you more information, but at least give some direction to say, yeah, let's at least explore it. We can at least get some information for you and see if it's a feasible option this fall to change order into a contract.
So your opinion on the process is do it now, do it spring, doesn't really matter as far as affecting the rest of the Hall Road construction?
It wouldn't affect Hall Road construction, probably wouldn't even affect price. What it's going to affect is Drexel, as far as having to go into their site next spring when they're operational or functional, and then tear up their site and, you know, bury a pipe through the middle of it. I don't know that this isn't by their showroom building, it's on the other side of their site, but needless to say, I'm sure it would have some type of disruption. So I think they were just asking, you know, how we could accommodate or if there was options, and I said, well, I think that was an option. That's all I told them at this point. So I wanted to at least kind of throw it out there and see if you guys were willing to at least explore it. I mean, there's really no cost for me to do anything different as far as getting the design done. It's just the change order cost. My concern would be, you know, that the contractor that we're about to hire comes in with a high cost, and then I think, you know, we certainly wouldn't want that taking advantage of the city. We'd want to be competitive at that point. I think that could be the basis, obviously, for telling Drexel that, you know, either they could look at pricing it and doing it and the city reimburse them, or, I mean, I know it's contrary to the development agreement, but if it's that important to them, you know, I think we'd have to kind of reopen that issue and kind of discuss how we would get that pipe installed.
What would that do to our funding calendar, so to speak, on this project, Patrick? Like, would there be funds available to go ahead and do this if we so choose?
I think that that infrastructure had to be accounted for already. I mean, it would be covered, just it's a matter of when when the bill would come due, and I think it would be covered. Yeah.
Out of monies expressly put towards this project, like out of that borrowing or however we're going to do this? Or would it be coming just out of the city budget?
No, it would have to come out of how we had already initially planned for that pipe.
Okay. Matt?
Jason, when you were saying this, that's the first thing that kind of popped in my mind too, was the idea that they're already here, Forest is, and the bid prices obviously came in significantly lower than what you guys were estimating, so they might throw out a number that's halfway decent. It's definitely worth asking and see what they say. And it seems like time-wise, it might work out, and probably would be best to be ripping up Drexel's parking lot next spring after it's fully gravelled, and they're probably trying to get things organized and stuff, so.
Andy?
Yeah, I was gonna say pretty much the same thing. Beat me to it. I agree. We should do it now.
Mike?
Is this pond construction, or what, I guess, what is is it just putting a pipe in for their driveway drainage during construction, or I'm trying to get more of a sense of the expense or the nature of the...
Right, so it would be a pipe that would be sized to take the storm water from Hall Road. So anything that would drain off of Hall Road, or in effect, anything that would drain, although very little drains from across Hall Road or under Hall Road, it would capture all that water. And there's actually two ways to convey to the south. They're proposing a ditch along Columbus Fall River Road to drain part of Hall Road, but there's also a pipe system that would be a low point where we would drain water to the south into the pond. So it would be for the full expanse from Hall Road across their site to the north edge of the pond. I don't have the actual footage here. I already did some calculation numbers. I thought the pipe needed to be, I don't remember what I said, 18-inch for the city, and I think they had proposed on upsizing it to 24-inch or something for their purpose, so that was the incremental cost. We have all that kind of figured out. We just have to get the grades set and the actual alignment set, where that pipe would be, and we just have to work with their engineers to make sure that we're both on the same page, and then it would just be a matter of getting some costs for that pipe construction. So it would be put in ahead of time, and then the road would be built later, and then the pipe would be functional after the road was built.
Okay. My only concern would be, that we don't have any redundancy, that we're not doing things twice by doing this earlier for them. I don't want to hold up the project, but also, how do you know at the end of the day what your estimated cost was and what the actual cost will be by providing that upfront? Because we haven't done borrowing yet for any of this. So if we're going to have that expense 6 months sooner, we have to know that, I guess. Thanks.
Yeah, I agree with you, Matt, as far as the convenience or logic of kind of the sequencing of it, for sure. But I guess my concern would be exactly what Mayor Tone brought up. I tried to say that earlier, but yeah, I guess that's my concern, is the funding for it and all that good stuff. So at this point, I'd say let's ask Forrest, see what we got, and we can it doesn't tie us into anything, but it gives us a good idea. So
All right, we will.
next Cal
Thanks.
then.
All right, I'm done with Hall Road if you guys are.
Been done for a while. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
All right, now we have a review streets for 2018 maintenance work. So we have a very good chart, map, and a whole lot of table to look at. Hopefully folks digested some of that beforehand. It's nothing new to us. We've been discussing this for a little while. So we're looking for further discussion and possible decisions or selections for 2018. And if you look on the back of the agenda item, we've got them broken out, color-coded. And again, we're trying to stick into a geographic area this time, correct, Jason, right? That's part of what drives these groupings.
Right, so we had a workshop, and I know some of you were there and some of you couldn't attend last time, and what we did was we provided some additional information from that session. What we did is we kind of retooled the groupings a little bit and then provided the map with some color coding. So you can match the color on the estimates and groups to the map. The idea here was obviously to generalize as best we can projects in the same area or connecting blocks. And then give you some various options for costs of borrowing. And what you're looking at with the color coding is there were some minor revisions and edits to length of projects and some other things since our last meeting. But I think as a whole, it's pretty much what we've seen. And then the lengthy tables, if you remember, we did a utility assessment and condition rating of the roadway and drainage for all the 1 through 3 ratings, put them in a spreadsheet, and then we also did that for all the 4 through 6 ratings, which aren't necessarily reconstructs, but potential overlays, or could be reconstructs depending on how you look at those. And so there was a lot of data surrounding the evaluations that went with the proposed groups. Not that the proposed groups were meant to eliminate anything, so if there's something that's not there that you want, I don't necessarily have detailed costs broke out for other sections other than these groupings, but if you pick a couple blocks or streets or areas, I can certainly come back and provide that information.
Can you remind me what kind of budget we're looking for on this, Patrick, as far as what our capacity is going to be able to cover next year?
Kim might be nodding or shaking her head behind me, but I believe it's in the 2 million range is something.
Kim, can you step to the mic, please, and bestow your wisdom upon us here?
A lot of it has to do with our value, our final value, and what
Right.
Obviously, we're going to be looking at the Hall Road borrowing. So that's going to, Patrick's right, but the 2 million includes what we would be spending on Hall Road eventually. So when I talked to Jason, I was talking to him about 1.1 million for a total project cost.
Thank you, Kim.
Now, I want to throw a couple caveats out there, and I know that we've got a budget workshop coming up to talk about the capital projects that may be coming down the pike for the city, which would also be impacting our general obligation borrowing in 2018, namely the fire truck, which is a 50-50 contribution with the Columbus Rural Group. With the wonderful cost that we got for the TIF4 utility project, between the borrowing and the contribution from for their share of the utilities, we will be able to pay for that project without having the sewer utility advance any money to TIF4. So that does help us a little bit with financing any street projects we'd like to do, because the utility will be able to take on some of their cost. So that's beneficial. So that's just a caveat, something to kind of keep in the back of your minds when we do look at these schedules. The thing I think I would kind of recommend tonight, and I apologize, is that we have a lot of other items that are going to be up for consideration for our borrowing capacity. Things like the senior center roof, that's a $60,000 hit, which probably can't be included in the regular operational budget for 2018. We have some other equipment requests from department heads so far through our budget process. And I think it's fair to say that we probably should look at everything collectively and then decide where we want to focus or how much we want to focus towards the different projects that we have laid in front of us. Because right now, if I were to take everything that we were looking at doing and roll it into one borrowing, we're up to about $4 million. That's on our wish list of everything we want to do. So I think it behooves us to, when we get into that workshop, maybe to sit down and kind of look at where do we want to prioritize the funding.
Thank you. Jason, can you give me an idea on the timeline for this? Because I know we had that issue in 16 as far as you getting a final from us, a final selection.
Well, my wish list was to get a decision in August, so we're obviously working into or past that. The rationale again behind that was if we started now, we would have time to do design, we'd have time for a couple public informational meetings, things that we really kind of short-circuited last time when we were kind of late to the game. And if you remember the timeline, for those of you who weren't here, I think we got approval to go in late November. So we had to design this and have everything on the street by January. So we were really compressed and real late in the season. So I would say the clock's ticking. Anything that we continue to go, if we're going to do an 18 project, we're just losing, I guess, time on to make sure that we're getting the word out and we're giving it ample time to be vetted by the public and to make sure that the residents impacted will know. And so I guess that's, I mean, I don't know if it makes sense to do a smaller project or look at holding off for 18. I mean, that's entirely up to you guys. I just know that the later we get in the season, it just really puts some hardship on us and, the residents to make this happen coming out of the gate next spring. So
Yeah, fair enough. With schedule of budget and borrowing discussions and stuff like that, can you remind me?
The first is the September 12th. Then we have the 24th and the 26th in September, and then we go into October.
When did we have borrowing?
Borrowing.
Capital
We have those
projects?
right at the beginning.
Okay.
So
next Tuesday?
We've got a couple other issues to deal with, so it may, if we can work it, we want to do sort of a kickoff and lay the landscape of the budget. So I guess depending on how the conversations go, we can get into that.
Or we could manipulate that agenda, maybe push that
Absolutely.
to the following week and take care of something like this that might be a little more time
Yeah, we
pressure.
certainly could.
Andy?
Just
Thanks,
looking
Patrick.
at the email, Tuesday, September 26th is the borrowing capital improvements tentative schedule.
Okay, so we could possibly, like you're saying, Patrick, rearrange that a bit and get this kicked up.
Yeah.
I don't know how everybody else feels about that, but I would like to get a decision on if we're gonna do 18 projects and what those are gonna be as soon as we can. But Kim, your point about keeping all the balls in front of us and trying to keep them in a good priority is well taken.
One quick thing too, Reagan.
Yes.
Just would point out, and again, Jason had it right, the decision comes down entirely to you. We do have the 2 DOT projects that are already gonna happen. The Park Avenue stretch, the overlay, and then the 16, yeah, the overpass they're gonna do between Dix and the on and off ramps. So that'll be like the 3rd leg of that, and that's been confirmed as to be taken in 18 as well. So
What would you be liking us to consider on those 2 points? Just the impact of additional projects in the community or costs, or what are you
Just-
thinking?
I guess when you think about sections of the city being torn up for road construction, we'll have-
Targeting where we go.
Yeah, that and to know that if it is decided that there is less or no project for the city, there still will be road construction done in 18.
Right.
So
Thank you, good point.
No bombshell.
All right. Well, I guess I would like to see us talk about this next Tuesday and try to be able to give more direction to City Engineer Letha at our next meeting on the 19th. Mayor Tome, your thoughts?
I agree with that. And I know when we had the workshop, we only had about half the council there, and that was a pretty lengthy conversation. So one thing I did want to point out that we discussed quite a bit in kind of breaking down groups and stuff is that Eric Anthon was there from Water and Light, and they had received some dollars for lead lateral replacement, and they have that throughout this James Street project, but also retain that for a couple more years. So those are dollars that can benefit any of these projects where we're replacing old infrastructure, looking at that too. So
Remind me though, did those funds have a sunset on them?
I thought I heard
I
3
thought
years.
3 years too.
But, yeah, I think they got over $300,000, and I don't think they're gonna expend $100,000 this year, from my understanding. So there's a good chunk of change there that could be used to
Yeah.
help offset some costs here.
It's a good point and one more variable to consider. All right. So we squared away on that one, Patrick, or we got a good direction to go? All right. Thank you, folks, for your time and information. Next, consider change order to contract with A1 for 2016 street projects. And the man of the evening, Mr. Letha, is here again.
I'm gonna need a break, maybe some water. I appreciate you putting everything together like this. The change order before you tonight is from last year's project, so this is the 2016 project, Charles Street, Mill Street, Prairie, and Church. There was some miscellaneous other things that the project covered. So when A1 Excavating was the contractor, and we have a change order in front of us tonight. This is kind of the first step of the project closeout, if you will. You know that the work was completed in substantial last year. There's been some restoration, maintenance, warranty type stuff they've been in several times this year fixing. We've been getting feedback from residents. We've sent out multiple letters. Matter of fact, Davis and I are going out tomorrow to look at an issue, but we're getting down to the 11th hour, for lack of better terms, and we're just looking to close out this contract. In order to do that, we kind of have to make this, much like the mixer on the lift station, kind of an official change order. This change order has been pending for some time. The contractor's already completed the work as needed to get the project completed, but he's asking for reimbursement for these items in this change order. We've gone through a process of obviously vetting this, and we're bringing it forward for consideration. The change order that you see before you tonight, many of you may have seen a draft or a budget number of 13,000 was potentially the change order. This one comes in at 15. There was one piece of information that was omitted inadvertently from that. It was a set of stairways that was constructed on a project that was fully assessed back to a resident that requested it. But that was outside of the current unit items on the contract, so we included it in the change order to kind of formalize it. Much of this is fairly minor work with removing some foundations we found along buildings. There was also some changes that we did for driveways, just those type of things that impacted the cost. All of the information that supports this change of $15,000 is attached to the contract change order that we're proposing tonight. So I'll certainly take any questions if anybody has any specific about the items within the change order. I will note that the original contract was $2,907,946. With this change order, the previous change orders decreased the amount by $64,000. This is adding 15 back in. We're still under the initial bid amount for the contract. That doesn't justify obviously approving any of this, but I just kind of wanted to make it known that most contracts have an increase of anywhere from 0 to 10% change orders on a contract amount. This contract came in negative with change orders, even though we've lost a little bit of it with this one, regaining some of that money back. But I feel very confident that we've done an excellent job on managing that, and there are a few of these little things that the contractor's asking for. I guess I don't see a particular issue with most of these, but I can certainly discuss them if you have any questions.
Real quick, cover item 8 for me again. The stairs, you said that was assessed to the owner for that full amount?
Yes, it was. That was a piece that came in as requested by the homeowner to put those in, and they were installed. We had to get a pricing for that as a separate, because we didn't have it in the contract.
Okay.
And so that was assessed back through the project.
Right, and they were assessed the full $2,530?
I'd have to go back and look at the assessment. I don't know if it was the full $2,530, but the assessment was done long before we got the final numbers for the stairs, so we may have had a placeholder in there that I think it was slightly less, but
Okay.
that cost did obviously get assessed back.
Matt?
Jason, looking through all this, looks good except for number 1 on the back of sheet 1 or 2, whatever it would be. Kind of going through the description and then the reasons for change. EBS took place, asphalt binding was paved, which is not typical sequence, additional personnel, etc. Subgrade did pass proof roll before construction on the road, but area experienced rainfall prior to paving. I know that more than once I sent emails to Patrick about A1's grading.
Yep.
And they're ripping out of Mill Street and leaving it into a bathtub.
Yep.
If it did pass proof roll and they were ready for paving, and I do remember too that it was still ready to go for a while, and I think it was Northeast who decided not to come in for a while. So as far as I'm concerned, that was scheduling on their part, and we shouldn't pay it.
I don't disagree whatsoever. This was the one I took exception with as well. I would agree with you. I told them that I don't like it. Their argument was we had demobbed our crews, and I know, I agree.
Not our problem.
I know. So that's where I said I'd throw it in here. I'd see if there was any feedback from the council on it. But certainly, as far as I was concerned, I certainly wasn't necessarily in support of this. Because it was EBS, I was okay with paying it at the contract unit price, which was less than this. It was a scenario where I happened to stumble upon this actually in action. They were starting to pave, and I saw the paver sink in when they were going to overlay this area, and I stopped them and made them omit this area and come back in and repair it. So it was kind of firsthand that I happened just to be there at the time this occurred. So certainly we can toss it out. I have no issue with that whatsoever.
Yeah, that number 1 and number 8 were the two that caught my eye as well, Matt. So, Andy, thoughts?
Yeah, I had a question on number 4. So remove new curb and driveway apron on Church Street. Was that one of those that the grades were wrong and it was flowing back in towards their houses?
And there's actually a contradiction there between the description and the reason. We have a Dickinson's address in the reason and a Church Street don't know if those are the same.
I think that was one where the homeowner requested that we widen the apron, and they had already poured part of it with the taper in, so they had to take out part of the apron to re-pour it and widen the apron per the homeowner's request. Now remember, those got assessed back to the homeowners. So the full cost of the request would have got assessed back, but that was on the corner of Church and Dickinson, yes.
So the house probably faces church and the aprons.
Yes. The apron's on Church, exactly.
Okay.
And then you said 8.
Eight was the stairs we already
8 was the
talked about.
stairs we
Yep.
talked about.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
So, okay, Mayor Tom?
I support your argument, Matt. I think we should at least say we're pulling it, see what their response is. The other question I have is for Kim. These are all kind of a mix of things. There's some sanitary stuff in here, so at the end of the day, when we approve the change order, that gets paid out of the specific funds, correct? Okay, thanks, Kim.
I too am in favor of trying to get this done without number one for the reasons previously stated by Matt and City Engineer Letha to a degree. So move this forward without item number one. Are we all in favor of that?
I am.
All right, so let's bring it forward to the next regular meeting minus description number one.
All right.
Can I ask one question? Outside of this, we still have retainage, correct?
Yes.
I mean, we haven't closed this out. This is just the change order?
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And we have that amount confirmed, all the quantities measured up. We've discussed at the staff level, we certainly don't want to release it all, but we're willing to release part of it in the interim because of a lot of the restoration work and stuff, and the concrete replacement has occurred. But we still have an issue out there associated with the continuity on the water main, and there's just a couple lingering things yet that we feel haven't satisfactorily been addressed, and Eric has been kind of I guess an outspoken voice for saying, let's make sure that we got everything buttoned up before we cut the check. And I'm perfectly fine with supporting. This is just the first step. If we can get this approved, then I guess my next thought would be there would be a partial payment for the remaining balance, and then we'd withhold it through the actual end of the warranty period, because the warranty period still has a little time left. I think substantial completion was, if you remember, it was late October, early November, I think is where we were when we finalized substantial. So that's where the warranty period will run through. So we'll hold that right through the end.
Okay. My concern was the continuity issue, because I know there's been discussion at the Water and Light Commission, but there hasn't really been any discussion here, and I want to make sure that there's an understanding before we release all that retainage.
From my understanding, the contractor and Eric have verbally come to an agreement on how to address that, but we're looking for something in writing to formalize it, and that hasn't been produced yet. So we're still asking the contractor for that information.
Thanks.
And I don't think we should release any retainage until that's taken care of. That's a pretty big outstanding issue with the whole continuity thing. 'Cause as far as I'm concerned, we dig up the road and put new pipe in, or they get nothing, because that's a complete mess up on their part.
And I believe the full amount that's left isn't all retainage. There's some that,
70.
there's 107 left, and I think retainage is
70,000, yeah.
71.
So obviously paying what they're due, but retainage wise, you might as well keep it until the whole thing's figured out. with
Yep, and that's
where
kind
we're
of the track we're going on. We want to, but like I say, getting this knocked out gives us the full authority to pay everything out, and then getting everything addressed gives us the right to release the retainage when we get there. All right.
Next, item 13, funny enough. James Street project update and consider DOT options for sidewalks on James Street.
Yeah, provided a update in a memo for your packets. There has been lots of concrete work been taking place on the project. This today, actually, they were doing some sidewalk in particular, so you'll see quite a bit of that work continue. The underground utility work is taking place yet on the area not paved, and I haven't been out to that area, but it was my understanding that the Dick Street traffic shift was supposed to be happening. So whether it did today or not, I don't know, but I know they were working pretty heavily with concrete on the one side of Dick's, and then they wanted to shove the traffic back over to it to start on the other side. So the other topic that dominated my memo was the East James Terrace, and I tried to lay out what I viewed was at least the options that we've discussed to date. I included some information from the DOT. We've talked with the DOT about the various options proposed for the slopes on East James Terrace, and including getting sort of a scenario or an understanding of what, in terms of what we want to do and who would be responsible for any fixes. And I'm of the understanding if we want to move forward with their suggestion, DOT would fund it. And as Ms. Knorr from DOT stated in her email, anything beyond that, the city would have to pick up. So I read that as we'll go up to the point where we'll cover the cost of our option, but if it's something else and it's higher, we'll go that high, but we won't go over that. So that's from her. So at this point, just I guess wanted to check in to see if there's thoughts on the council's part. We had DOT actually analyze the step option that they discussed when they were here back in July. We had them analyze an option that Jason had thrown out when we met with DOT staff. Doing nothing, I guess, still remains to be an option out there, potentially by addressing the issue with benches or trash cans or something to show a separation could be possible. So that's where we stand. DOT is pressing me for some kind of a response, but I don't know, what that really means. I'm sure they want to know where we're headed, but I've expressed that this is an important decision for the city, so we have to be very careful in our next steps and determining what's best for us.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe I read in her email, she's basically floating a decision date or a direction date, I think is how she referred to it, of this Friday.
That's what she included in her email, yeah.
How firm are they on that? If we don't have a decision on that by Friday, what's the consequence? No idea.
I don't know, but I sense that they'll still accept what we want to do. Mr. Pylon was here and described the situation, and I don't think they're happy about it either. So I do believe they want to work with us. I think they're trying to get a decision so they can move ahead is what they're asking for. So.
Mike?
There's a lot of concrete work going on right now, so I suppose they probably want to add this into that point instead of waiting longer than they need to. The one thing that I guess I'm a little confused by in the option number 2 description here, it's the 3.5-foot terrace would be torn out to add a 1.5 foot of sidewalk, and I hate using that term sidewalk because it's not a sidewalk, it's a terrace, and then a 2-foot step. And I believe when Dave was here at our meeting, he had talked about putting a 1-foot step in. So I don't know what happened at the meeting or if this is just a typo. I think if we're going to look at the option of adding a step, it's important to see a sketch and see what it's going to look like. I think adding 2 feet of step is going to look like you're adding 2 feet to the existing sidewalk, but that uneven ridge is not going to disappear. I'm definitely in favor of adding the step. It's just going to have to be designed so we understand what we're getting. I think 1.5 feet may help some door dings, but it may not alleviate all of them. So I don't understand the mentality of the 2-foot step as opposed to a 1-foot step and then 2.5 feet of extra terrace.
If I may, the 1.5 foot would be coming off of the existing sidewalk. So then from the curb to the back of the step would then be 2 feet.
That's not the way I'm reading it here. And there's no sketch, so.
That's the way I recall him describing it.
Okay. I thought I remember him saying a 1-foot step, though.
Yes. You're right, Mike. It was 1 foot additional onto the sidewalk, and then the rest of it would be that step down to the flat terraced area off the back of the curb. Only I can figure is he might be taking into account a step to a building or something along those lines and trying to build in a half a foot extra.
Oh,
Or it might be a typo. That's what I can think of.
yeah.
Andy?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Mike, were you done?
Yeah.
Well, my 2 cents on this would, option 2, the Hurley option would be my preferred option, but clearly they're not a fan of that and doesn't sound like they want to pay for it. That's going to be really big in our decision. And I agree with Mike. I mean, if we are going to go with option 1, I need to see what that's going to look like before I can make that decision. Because at this point, with these other 2 options, I'm still on option 3, leave it the same until I see something more concrete.
Trina?
At this point, I'm fine with just leaving it as is. If the DOT is willing to fully pay for the changes, that would be wonderful. I do think we would need to go with the railing. I think it'll be more of a tripping, falling hazard to have a step just kind of randomly there. So just wanted to add that.
I think we should go back, Patrick, and ask to see if we can get a little more flesh out of what that design would look like on the step, and then we can
Sketch.
take these options, yep.
Yeah.
And then we can, get a visual on it. I've been in favor of the step for a bit, but yeah, I would withhold judgment until we can see a sketch, and then maybe we get some other stuff. I don't know if there's anything else to flesh out on these other, well, I guess the only other option with anything to do with is the Hurley option, which I wasn't at the last meeting, but that one was kind of news to me, but it seems like they have design issues with that one, correct?
That's what
They don't
their
know if it's
response was
feasible.
after having it analyzed it, so.
Yep.
Yep.
So, yeah, let's go back to them and see if we can get that sketch and have it presented to us at the next cow. Matt?
I think one thing to check, looking at the picture on the back here, I think it was provided by Chief Meister, correct?
So it's something that he found, I don't know where he got it.
So as far as I understand, this would be like our step option basically with a railing. I guess if following this option, as part of, Carla doesn't allude to that in her email, maybe just verifying that if we do a step, if we then go with a railing, is that also going to be incorporated into it? And then would there be a cost share because of powder coating black if the city wanted to match the poles, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, too? If we're going to hash it out, let's hash it out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that picture was interesting for sure.
I don't think it looks that bad.
I don't either. It provides the safety features that others have concerns about as well. Mayor Tome?
I don't mind the railing, I think it looks nice, but one thing to look at in this photo, we're not going to have a railing 78 feet long that you can't pass between. I understand the idea of having delineation, but they've got a stairway with railings. So how often do you do that, and where do you do that? And I think it's just a lot more complex than looking at the idea and saying, yeah, I think a railing would be very nice. I think
Yeah.
it would be too.
It's
but
not apples to apples.
We
here.
might have to do the railing after the fact, because if they're not gonna pay for it, we're gonna have to do it and start looking at those expenses. But I think the option of the step is gonna have to be a yes or a no before they're done and out of here, so.
Trina?
Oh, just for a railing question, I guess it wouldn't necessarily need to go all the way across the storefronts. It could just be a railing on each side to delineate the 78 feet where the step is, just as some sort of visual to break up and something for people that need something to grab onto.
I think once we see a sketch too of the step laid out, it'd be easier for us to envision what a railing or that would look like. So at this point, I'd like to keep moving along here, and I think you've got direction.
Yeah, if they
All right.
account for the current street light and, just the specifics of that terrace, I could say, where would a railing make sense? So you can have that visual with or without the
Yeah.
railing and make a decision based off of that.
All right. Thank you, guys. Number 14, review of the amendment to city school facilities agreement. So this is something we've been working on for a few months here, hopefully getting close to completion, final draft. Patrick?
Okay, yeah. we've been going back and forth with the school district on this. I think we're getting pretty close. The copy of the changes that's in your packet is something that the school district had reviewed and essentially said, we're good. Since then, I got a message from the superintendent just with some questions about the storage, and despite my having called her back, I haven't heard exactly what that issue is and whether it would affect the language of the agreement. I appreciated your response email, Reagan, about the cancellation, so I tweaked with that language. I don't think it's going to affect anything, just clarifies it a little bit about the 48-hour cancellation. So I think we're close. I'd like to know what Superintendent Duman had in mind with her phone call last week about that. But essentially where we're at here is what we have in front of you, barring any questions from the school district.
You said her issue was storage, according to the message?
Well, she just said she had something she had to talk to me about in relation to that. So, and then I had called her back. It was the first day of school, and we haven't connected since then.
Okay. Do you have it on your calendar to follow up with her this week?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, my point on the cancellations thing was just trying to, like you said, provide clarity. I thought maybe it'd be best to start out by saying it's a 48-hour notice and establishing the policy in black and white up front, and then speaking to exceptions or conditions for not providing 48 hours.
And if it helps, I put something down under that based off of your recommendation. I can just read here and see if there's any thoughts on that. So I would include, just under cancellation, it would say there will be a 48-hour notice requirement for canceling a reservation by either party. Emergency situations such as those related to severe weather requiring the need for use or evacuation of a facility, the imposition of WIAA scheduled events or other unforeseen needs for the facilities would be exempt from the 48-hour rule. And then I just left it at that.
Yeah. It's not quite how it reads in the packet, but I like that idea, which is just get the 48 hours in there and then talk about possible reasons to exempt the 48-hour rule. Matt?
I guess I had a question, Patrick, about your memo. The cancellations, the very last line there where it talks about other key issues, some days or when school is closed, all programs must be canceled. Is that a must versus a shall question? Is it required that if they cancel school, all programs must be canceled? Even if the city is not technically part of the school and if the city could still use the facility, would it then be open, allowed to?
So the message on that and the intent of the line in the memo was if there's a snow day, everything shuts down and any city program that's scheduled that day will not be able to take place.
Okay. So, I guess another question I had too was about Amy Jo and the fob versus the electronic system. It's Amy Jo wants to get a hold of a fob, and then this new system for the school is some programmable thing that allows people to get in based on super secret codes or something along those lines, or I guess
it's a programmable timing thing that they can enter in based upon
ahead of time, so she can show up at 6:30 and the door unlocks and she can walk right in, kind of thing. Okay.
Right.
I just want 20 kids to be sitting there holding bags of balls and
that continues to be a concern for Amy Jo.
I think Amy Jo's would prefer the fob. Do we know exactly what the school district's resistance is to issuing a fob?
In our discussion of that, it's left at we feel that the issue can be addressed without one.
Was this security system in place last year as far as like the scheduled access? They can program it and the door will unlock for her. Was that how it went last year? I don't remember.
I'm not certain of that.
Yeah, because I know, like you're just saying, she had issues with getting in there in a timely manner before her scheduled events, but I don't know if if she was meeting somebody with keys or if the schedule thing was in place and just not functioning.
Right, right.
And I know I've seen emails back and forth on this, but I cannot recall what
It makes
Amy
for a
Jo's situation
little
was.
bit more of a logistical thing, and if the program's at 6:30 and they put 6:30 and the door doesn't open until 6:30, you know, I'm sure Amy likes to do a little bit of prep work before stuff happens. And
Yeah, I mean, I would prefer to see Amy Jo have a fob. I mean, she's a trusted city employee, so with access to all kinds of facilities throughout the city. So I also wonder about, what computer malfunction, who knows what the heck could happen, and all of a sudden no one's getting in there and no one's available from the school district in a timely fashion to help her out. Could be a possible scenario. Mayor Tome?
Patrick, do you happen to know the date that we came to this original agreement? The original facilities use?
I want to say it was shortly after I had started back in 2013.
I know it was
It
at
was
least 3 years
fall.
ago, if not close to 4
Sure.
years ago.
Mhm.
Okay. I think, given where we are, I know that you've put a lot of work into this, and there's been back and forth, and I met with you and Annette and Thierry the first time. But I think having, an intergovernmental agreement between two different governmental agencies that's 4 years old, it's the right time to look at it to make sure that everybody understands why we're doing this. There are facility issues with the school and with the city, and working together is important. And when we had this initial agreement, we had a joint school board meeting, and I thought it went very well. It was very apparent why we need to work together and have a healthy partnership in the city. And I think that's something that I'd like to move towards with this agreement. We have a city administrator, we have a city council, we understand our policy and what kind of language we want to put into this agreement. However, the school has their own policies, and I think it's important to make sure that what we're trying to lay out in this language comports with both governmental agencies, and that this works this way, and that it's a balanced agreement that everybody is supportive. So, I mean, I think that ultimately that's something that I'd like to see, is having a joint school board meeting, just so it's very clear that we have a good relationship with them.
I'd be in favor of that as well, regardless of the history of how this came about, but especially considering that's kind of how this came to fruition anyway, was through a joint meeting, so.
And I think that was the first step as far as trying to come to an agreement because of things that had happened historically before that, and I think kind of keeping the spirit of this agreement at the forefront is very important, as opposed to just filing it and whatever. So.
Yeah, we've gotten this far, and it looks like we just have to do a little push over the hill to get it home, so maybe that'll be the engine to drive it home. Anyone else, thoughts?
I'd like to see Patrick's updated language.
Yeah. See, can we go to work on that, Patrick, see if they would be agreeable to meeting in a joint setting and trying to get this thing finalized and completed, and maybe we could see at that point or before in an email the draft language you brought up this evening.
Sure, I can send that language out tomorrow.
Okay.
And I can also effort for a joint meeting with council and the school board.
All right. Anything further needed on that topic?
Not on my end.
All right. Thank you very much, Patrick.
Thank you.
All right. No parking signage. Request of Capsule Funeral Home.
So, the same memo from last time with an update. Mr. Kepsel clarified that yes, indeed, that's the kind of sign he's looking for, mainly to help in times when there isn't funeral business. It's fairly narrow street there on West Harrison with the church parking. It just has become, I guess, an issue for them to exit and enter from the side there. So they're hoping for the sign similar to the Jensen Funeral Home, which I included also in the memo again.
Matt?
Reading the memo from last time, Josh explained that he had recently had trouble with the funeral processions and their ability to exit onto West Harrison Street when they have funerals. And then looking at the update, kind of middle of your paragraph, this would work for him primarily due to concerns about exiting from the property to the street on non-funeral days. So now if I understand Mr. Kopsel correctly, he's having issues on both non-funeral days and on funeral days. I think I think it's still kind of now it's an even more moving target than it was before. After reading this, it seems like we just need to make no parking on one side of Harrison, period, the end, and move on.
I think that would help him. I think that I think the communication was poor last time in terms of the true issue being the non-funeral times.
So he has any problem getting the hearse and the funeral procession out during funerals with people parking on both sides of the street. He has issues with people coming in and out on non-funeral times when people are parked on the street.
Yeah, particularly as employees and, when there's cars parked on the opposite side and actually cars parked on the same side.
But there's no issues with the hearse coming out?
He didn't indicate that.
Okay.
I'm assuming that he does want parking there, but only funeral related, that if it's someone involved in the procession, they'll know themselves when to move. So I don't know if he just wants it to be no parking period.
My understanding is he wants to have parking there for when there is a funeral.
Correct.
But no parking the rest of the time.
When you have a funeral procession, you got the hearse and everything, but you have visitors and
a lot of visitors,
family, and
they need
they
parking
all
in the
can't
area.
fit in the property, so they have to find a place adjacent.
I think it boils down that he brought up a very good point that Harrison's a very narrow street and we should limit parking on the full block, and there's parking on other side streets, and that remedies a problem for good. It obviously goes above and beyond what he's asking for, but I can't wrap my head around his request. It seems it still seems counterintuitive. And I feel like unless somebody's driving a monster truck or something, nothing's probably bigger than a hearse or a limo. Maybe that's what he's trying to get out.
I guess if I can step into his shoes for a second, not that I've ever dreamed to be.
Put on your mortuary jacket.
Right.
Yeah.
If there's a funeral and his lot is filled, the hearse and the procession, but there's spillover
Onto the street.
It would behoove him to have spots to say, these are two spots available for family that couldn't park inside.
But
that's
then
what I think the
wouldn't
goal
that then
there.
impede people exiting from the funeral home, which was the whole point initially for the request?
Yeah, I guess I can see what you're saying, but I think in a procession, it's more measured and slow, and there's direction.
So that might be the caveat point to saying, yes, it actually is maybe harder to turn out, but since it's a slow procession of a funeral, it's fine.
I've observed where there's been personnel out there actually directing where people should go, holding people back when they're exiting, and so.
Okay.
Regan?
Well, okay, I'll jump ahead of Andy. A couple things. I think one, it sounds like we still have some confusion. We're still conjecturing a lot of what he intends or what his problem is. It would probably be a good idea if he could come here and explain it himself.
Ding, 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 ding.
But my other point would be there is probably a fairness argument here that we're all not addressing with the other business in town that had a similar request and a similar problem. Maybe not exactly the same problem, but it's similar enough to me to think that if we did this for another business in town, we should seriously consider doing it for him if this is what he's asking for, and it's at least reasonable based on our clarification and our conversation. with him.
But the question being, are the streets the same width? Is it?
Well,
I mean,
does it need to be to the inch? I don't think so. I think it's close enough for me to say I'd be comfortable giving him the same treatment. But I just wanted to bring that up, that there is a fairness aspect to this.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, consistency. Andy?
Yeah, I think that I would be in favor, I don't think, I would be in favor of restricting parking on the north side of West Harrison, but only in the areas that it would affect his property. I don't want to take parking away from the house on the corner. That's not fair to them. It's already going to be a crunch if we take away other parking spots. And to Regan's point too, I agree with that. I mean, we've already set a precedent, allowing a change like this to happen. So I think we should do it.
Mike?
I think the precedent that we set was confusion, and I think that that's why we're going through this process again. And I remember the first time that we asked for clarification again, we had someone come in. What I thought we were getting towards, which I thought was a good solution, was temporary signage. That you are addressing the issue on a temporary basis instead of sticking a sign in the curb that is defining parking 24/7, 365 days a year. And that's where I think maybe, Matt, you're getting to this.
maybe this is
It's
a prime time to address a prior mistake made by confusion and make changes going forward. Unset a precedent with the previous funeral home. I mean, just because something was done prior doesn't necessarily mean it might be considered the right decision made, or at least making a decision based off of experiential data that has been seen.
I'm not confused by that request. I think it's pretty clear to me.
Help me, Andy, I'm so confused over here.
I thought that's where we were at the last meeting, was that it seemed counterintuitive to what the request was.
Yeah, because I mean, because
You have to clear that up for me.
that's the first thing I thought of when I first read this last time was, oh, temporary parking. They just, I mean, I don't think they're doing funerals, gangbusters. I hope people aren't dying that quick around Columbus, but I mean, temporary basis would make more sense for what they need as opposed to a hard, fast rule on a street that sits there, 365, 24/7 kind of thing. But
Well, like Andy, you said you don't think it's fair for them to restrict parking to the house on the corner. We could have 150 opinions, I guess, on where we should or shouldn't do it. I would rather give them the freedom to put out temporary signs that say this solves the problem for the situation that we're having, and then when their need for that restriction is over, the signs go away.
because this is the funeral home restricting parking for the church. So if there's no funeral on Sunday, the church is saying, well, why the hell don't we get parking on Sunday? So then it's no parking except for funerals and for church, and then no parking for funerals and church and property owners, and then we're back to having.
But it's
parking.
only on the property or only on the side of the street that abuts his property, correct?
But it seemed like part of the issue was that there was people parking there because the church was really busy. The church had, it's right there and people were going in and out and there's church events, and maybe I'm making this up just to prove my point. I'm not sure off the top of my head now. It's getting a little bit late, but
Well, because of the church events, though, the cars park on that side of the street as well.
Yeah.
And that's causing the visual and
so then I feel like
access
we're giving preferential treatment to the funeral home versus the church versus the homeowners. And I mean it's small, it's small potatoes here, but
Seems like a safety issue to me.
I will agree, as with construction, stage one, I cut down Harrison, go over to Birdsey and run across, and there's always cars parked on both sides right there, and it's kind of, threading a needle sometimes, and I have a couple mirrors in my garage that aren't there, so it is a point that maybe it's just behoove us to just limit parking in general for the entire street, because it is a narrow street, and then address every other narrow street in town and make parking on only one side. I mean, let's keep the ball rolling here,
I'm definitely not in favor of limiting on-street parking. I think that was one of the things we did with all the snow ordinance stuff, was trying to allow people to have those extra parking spots in properties that are limited as far as driveway and garage capacities. Trina?
I'm feeling comfortable offering this funeral home the same sign as the other funeral home had. I really think it makes more sense for them to have a permanent sign so that people aren't parking and then the funeral home has an emergency and that someone's in the spot and they can't get out and they're not involved with the funeral happening. So I think that's why he wants a permanent sign and not something he can pull out when the event's occurring.
But then how do you then police to make sure that the person parking in these spots are there for the funeral all the time?
don't-
So the funeral home's giving out tags to every parking
You get a little orange sticker that you.
for when you're in the procession, but if you're parking, not everybody who goes to a funeral goes through the procession to the burial. All funeral patrons are funeral patrons, but not all funeral patrons are burial patrons, I guess.
So Matt, is part of your trouble kind of getting a hold of this one, is it the argument he's making about traffic flow, but really maybe the goal is saving parking?
It
That
seems like
contradiction somewhat?
his initial request was kind of reversed of what logically made sense based on what his needs are. And it seems that putting up signs, in my mind, I mean, unless he comes in here and says, well, here's exactly what's going on, you know, it seems like you're putting people there in spots, and the biggest vehicle probably coming out of the funeral home is the hearse itself. So it makes sense that you wouldn't have cars parked there. And then it falls along with, well, if we're gonna put up a sign along with, because the other funeral home got it, you know, but then if we're limiting parking only for the funeral home, but what about the church and the houses? Well, then we have to leave it for the house on the corner too, so then you're blocking off one spot so that they can get out. I mean, maybe it just turns into painting the curb yellow so that they can make their turn heading north on Harrison every time. I think this might be, because them basically saying nobody parks there except for the funeral is preferably even for the funeral home, be damned to everybody else on the street.
It's 2 spots, right? Is that what
I mean, I guess it's kind of a getting into a greater conversation about, we had winter parking kind of conversation to make sure that it's easy to throw up a sign, but are we making a decision long-term that makes sense, applicable, looking at varying situations here and there? You know, is it a blanket idea of if there's a funeral home, they get a sign, or should we be looking at each instance, I guess? I mean, I'm not opposed to putting it up. At the end of the day, it's, you know, a couple parking spots on Harrison Street outside of downtown. I think the initial start with this was that it was a little bit of a confusing request on his part that seemed counterintuitive, and it still seems a little counterintuitive to me, I guess, and it ends up kind of being that there's a spot for him.
Yeah, I think the end game is to have the 2 spots, and I'm okay with granting the signage, and actually I would prefer it to be permanent rather than temporary, because I just think you're going to have issues with when someone parks and where that person might be in a given area, trying to get a hold of, like, it's temporary doesn't work for me.
And if that's what we're fine with, saying that we're fine basically designating spots for the funeral
That's
home.
what I'm fine with.
Because I feel
what we're fine with.
like Bob and Sarah on the corner at their house are going to say, well, why the hell did you take away my spot and give it to the funeral home? You know, so as long as we have a answer for Bob and Sarah on the corner, that's all I'm concerned about. I don't think it's me, though. I think it's you two who are going to get the questions, so have fun with that.
No, I like questions. I'm fine with it. Mayor, tell me you have more.
I guess we'll do whatever. It just, the sign isn't attached to an ordinance. There's not gonna be tickets given out. I just think giving the property owner some discretion to control the parking is a better way to go than having a sign that doesn't really do much. There's no parking except for funeral events. Doesn't mean you have to be part of that event to park there. It means you can park on the street on that day.
But we've done what we could do if we go in that direction to try to
Yeah.
alleviate a problem for the funeral home, which is a unique business and obviously has crowd issues at different times. Rod?
I'm fine with putting up the sign. If there's horrible issues in the future, we can always take down the sign and, you know, regroup. But there's going to be issues on whatever we do. You know, if we have temporary signage, what happens if someone's parked there already and he's a temporary signage, but he's not in town? There's issues on whatever we do, but do what we did with the other business.
So it sounds like we can move this forward to the next regular meeting and take a vote and see how it shakes out.
I feel like Paul might have a comment to say. Paul, you're making a lot of faces down there. Come on, back me up. I know you want to.
You don't need to, Paul. It's not his meeting.
I will remain silent.
Thank you.
You know nothing.
Well, I know plenty, but I will remain silent.
All right. Let's move on to the easement for gas main service on South Water Street.
Okay. Wrote up a memo for the packet, and we had a gentleman from We Energies come in to talk to Davis and I. They'd like to do some work on gas mains in the downtown. The main issue is an area behind East James off of Water. They have an easement included and it's included with a map to do some work there. I think logistically that probably isn't too much of an issue. I would want Paul to have a quick look at the easement, but they're looking for approval on that. And then secondarily, as part of that discussion, he talked about work also on East James, going back into the alley area, right in front of where we're talking about the East James Terrace slopes there where that alley goes. And apparently didn't see the construction work going on because that project would involve digging up brand new concrete. So at that point, he was going to say, okay, well, we understand we can't do that. I'm going to look back at Davis because I think he might have had a conversation with him after that with maybe an update, but we certainly don't want to see new concrete torn up for this.
What they're proposing would be at the corner of James and South Water, removing 2 panels of the sidewalk, and then at the alley on East James, removing 2 panels of the sidewalk, directionally boring between the 2 and then shooting into the alley. He said as soon as they were done, they would re-pour those 4 panels. In that discussion, he said, well, is there any water or sewer through here? I said, well, yeah, there's at least 3 water services. Well, if they're deeper than 6 feet, he wouldn't need to pothole those. So there could be an additional 3 panels that he'd have to pothole, rip out, and then replace. I said, well, what if we don't give you permission to do this? He said, well, then they'll have to come off of Mill Street through the bank parking lot and try and access their main in the alley that direction. So that's why my thought was if we're going to be doing this step, let them pull up their sidewalk. It all looks like it's being done at the same time. If we're not doing any concrete work on the sidewalk step terrace area, then I'm not in favor of them ripping up brand new sidewalk because they made an error.
Andy?
Question for Davis. The sidewalks that they're proposing to rip out, are they on James or are they
On James.
on Water? Oh, boy.
Brand new sidewalk.
Did you talk with DOT staff about this at all? As this was supposed to be done during construction or part of their,
No, it was not.
or prior to construction work?
This is an alley issue. They have several alleys in town that they are experiencing leaks on. And I said, well, we've been planning this project for 5 years.
Yeah.
How did you not know? Well, the guy that was doing this is no longer here.
Yeah.
So this guy is new to it, and that was their excuse. I don't buy it.
I definitely would be in favor, if this ends up happening, that it gets poured, not by them. Utilities are not very good about pouring sidewalk back in, especially having nice, good DOT state project sidewalk, and they'll pour in some junk that's cheap, and we'll have maintenance issues in the long run. So whether it's us and they pay us, or we can get it done with the step or something, that'd be my one caveat to
The
this.
sidewalk out in front here was all poured, by senior center and across the street and everything. That was done by a contractor for We Energies. I think it looks fairly decent.
Yeah, that's different
So
than a
that's
lot of
what I
other
would
stuff you get.
expect
Yeah, that's, yeah.
over here if we did allow it. And he did say, we understand you don't want this left for weeks and weeks. We would do our pothole stuff, we would put our main in, and then immediately come back and do the concrete.
They would do the concrete when?
As soon after they install their main. So they're gonna directional bore, do their connection, directional bore the other direction into the alley. And then they would do their restoration. He made it sound like the next day.
Mm. But when would they do the gas work? October, September?
He indicated it sooner rather than later, but that all depends on whether I issue them a permit or not. They have other alley work that they have already submitted a permit for, not on James Street, that I'm already looking at that.
Okay.
This one I told him, that's got to go to council.
Mike?
So what we have in our packet right now is an alternative to what they want to do? Is that what I'm understanding? Or that's a second project that you're talking about? The alley on James Street? We have, this is the parking lot
behind
Chef's Corner on
Jenks.
South Water.
This is one of the other issues where they're having problems.
Okay.
So this is like project 2, and project
Yeah.
1 that you're talking about right now is actually
Yeah, I think
on-
there's 3 separate ones that they want to do. I told them no on the James Street one, until
we talk.
Okay.
My question on this one is what, they need an easement to do this in that parking lot? From my understanding of that parking lot is owned by about 800 different people and that the county owns part of it, so can we grant an easement where they're asking? There's a utility pole right there, but I know that it's a mess back there. I don't understand what we're addressing tonight, I guess, or when, but we're talking about James Street, and now there's a picture of that parking lot. And if
Yeah, I
they're
thought we were
gonna,
only talking about the.
if they're gonna bore holes and do underground there, they just replace that apron in front of that parking lot as well. I don't know if that was part of the restoration work from the utility work last year, but there's some new concrete right at the entrance of that.
That was part of the utility work, again, potholed areas for the James Street project.
So would they be potholing in the same area again?
Probably.
I definitely don't want to see those sidewalks on James Street ripped up, then they're gonna be all discolored. Mess.
Bear in mind, we're talking about gas main, though. I mean, it's,
Sound like there's other,
if
there are other alternatives, right?
so if they don't do the James Street sidewalk, they could come in off of,
They can come in off of Mill, directional bore underneath the bank parking lot, according to the gentleman I spoke to. This is their preferred way. There are alternatives.
Yeah, I'm sure this is more efficient, but. Say again?
new sidewalk, new road, and they got 1077s and went through the 1078 process with us years ago. They did a lot of movement, a lot of main, a lot of work prior to, and what year are we in, 17? In 16, prior to the work, and I'm sure they did work too as part of the James Street project. This is probably a, fuck, we missed something.
Mm-hmm.
So,
An oopsie.
Yeah.
And
I
who
think
looks
is what you were
bad?
saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. Andy?
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Rod?
As Mike said, we aren't even quite sure if we can actually grant easement.
We have two issues.
You can certainly grant the easement. It's whether or not you are the only person that needs to grant the easement. That's the $100 question.
Good point.
I think we need to parse out that there's two questions here, though. We have the James Street new sidewalk / Mill Street bank parking lot, us, and then the crazy back alley
Water
parking
Street.
lot, Mike's favorite part of the city question, which turns into the $100 question from Paul about who owns it.
It won't be a question for us, that'll be a question for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that wasn't clear to me that we're talking about two projects at the same time. Is that, okay, now it's clear.
So if I may, the James Street and pulling out brand-new sidewalk,
No, no.
then that's all I needed to hear.
So that's where they're gonna access from Mill Street. Okay.
They'll have to find another way in because we're not letting them come through our brand-new sidewalk.
They wouldn't happen to be two sidewalk panels that need to be replaced on a punch list? Okay.
No,
Because there's plenty to pick from.
all the panels that I saw were in great shape.
And all expenses would be on their dime for
Correct.
doing the more expensive routes.
Everything
via
is on
mill?
them,
Okay.
yes.
So setting aside whether we have complete jurisdiction to grant the whole easement or not behind in that parking lot, would they be messing with that sidewalk on water at all? I couldn't remember from 5 minutes ago.
I haven't seen their full plan on that, so I'm assuming they would directional bore from in the terrace area. I don't know exactly where their main comes underneath there.
Okay.
But again, anything that they disturb, if it's sidewalk, roadway, curb, whatever, they have to reestablish.
So we've given direction as far as James Street / Mill alternative. We need to give a clear sense of direction on the parking lot.
Because that looks like it's parking lot and driveway based on where their gas diagram shows. So they'd probably be potholing out a piece of driveway apron. If it's still quite not down that far, not with where they stopped, and then the whole parking lot itself.
And again, this is to put in new main because the old ones are leaking.
Yeah, not a frivolous project. We get that for sure. Guess I'll jump out. I would be in favor of trying to grant that easement and then having them do their homework and seeing who else they need to speak to. We good? There it is.
Thank you so
sir.
much.
All right, so now we are on to item 17, adjourn to closed session per 19.851C personnel to consider the employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, specifically the city clerk position and the director of planning and development position. So I need a motion to go into closed session.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, and we need a roll call on that one. Yep. I'm just surprised I remembered it was a roll call vote. It's only two options, but.
I packed up too soon.
You're fired.
Kenny?
Oh, yes.
Lot?
Yes.
Reed?
Aye.
Kroll?
Aye.
Holm? Wexler?
Aye.
Hendrickson?
Aye.
Unanimous.
All right. So we are going into closed session. We will not be returning to the air this evening. Thank you all for tuning in, and we will see you Tuesday, September 19th. Have a good evening.